Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is ArtCrumbs. If it's your first time here, welcome to the channel. I hope you will find my channel helpful. What I do here is I go over tips and tricks for manga and art creation. Today we'll be going over Komawari, which is creating a smooth and engaging experience for the reader. When we look at paneling in the Western world, like Western comics, and then paneling in manga, generally they're pretty much the same except in right to left reading and Komawari, it's a little bit different. There's a few extra considerations that we take into effect that don't exist necessarily in Western comics. However, they may be very similar. The term Koma is the panels. You'll be seeing Koma or Goma used a lot moving forward, especially once we get to the second video talking about the different panel types. If you take a look at the sample that I have here for you guys, one of the things that you'll see in this area, one of the things you'll see in this area here is we have a lot of S curves and double S curves. This is one of my personal favorite ways to set up my layouts. And so if you actually go back and read God's Bane, which is my manga that I'm currently working on, you'll notice that this pattern happens a lot. We can see the S curve here, and then we can see a double S curve here, same thing with an S, a double S, and then another S. You don't necessarily have to use this type, it's just what I happen to use. And so with that sort of like really super fast introduction, let's go ahead and get into manga grids, which will be our first section. So manga grids, grading in comics and manga generally doesn't necessarily mean you have to use these grids as is. It's more like, here's the most basic structure that you can start from, and then change the size, change the placement to make it work best for you. In Western comics, there's typically a 9-grid system. You can see this very clearly in a series like Watchmen, which actually does use a 9 panel grid pretty regularly. In manga, however, there's two main schools of thought here. We have sandangumi, which is a more traditional way of doing this. Some mangaka use this 2x4 panel system, or some of the mangaka that use this 2x4 panel system would be like Rumiko Takahashi. You can see this very clearly in a lot of her work. Osamu Tezuka is also one that's really easy to see this. Toriyama, so like Dragon Ball, you can also see this structure. How they use it is slightly different for each of the creators as far as like how they structure their gutters and the Wakusen, which we'll get into later. So this is more of an old school method that people use. A more modern way of doing this, and this is more common, especially in manga like My Hero Academia, Demon Slayer, like the newer manga, tends to use sandangumi, which is a 2x3 grid. Notice that the grids I have here stop at the safe area line. The reason for that we'll actually get into later. That's not important at this moment, that's for another video, but that's pretty typical. Also, one thing to consider is 4 Koma, which is another type of grid. There's 2 different ways to do 4 Koma. This is actually one of them, where you have a set of 4 and then a set of 4. Another way that people will do this, if they decide to work in 4 Koma, is they'll have 4 rectangular structures on their panels on their page. And then even still, there's another way that people will do this. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll have 2 on each page, and then each 2-page spread is 1 4 Koma. So, or yon Koma, as it's more traditionally called. So you can see with like just these 2 structures here, we have a really wide variety of ways that we can set up our panels and our layouts. Even with this, we can actually take both of these grids, and there are 8 basic panel layouts that we can use. Some of them having 2 panels, and then some of them having 3 panels. Starting with these structures, we can get 6 basic layouts. So let's take a look at that next. Here we have our 3 panel layouts and our 2 panel layouts. Most pages that you see in manga, doesn't matter if it's sandangumi or yondangumi, it doesn't matter. Most of them start from one of these 8 possible options. Here, if we wanted to, what we could do is we could do this, and there you go. So we technically have 4 straight panels. Another option we could do is we could go from here to here, or we could do something like here and here. those all start from this basic structure. Same thing with here. We can cut this up, we can cut that up, we can shape, we can basically come in here and cut and add smaller koma to add to the interesting layouts to make it more fun and exciting. I mean, if you wanted to, I mean, theoretically, you could technically use these as is, but it's not as exciting to kind of just leave them with these like super basic layouts. But remember, you know, these are just ideas. You don't necessarily like have to use these exactly as they are. These are just ideas, and they're places to start. So don't feel like obligated that you have to start with these, but I would encourage you, when you are looking at manga, when you're reading manga, start paying attention to the types of structures that you're seeing. If you want, one of like the best things that you can possibly do for yourself is to open some manga, open your favorite manga, and actually like kind of just get it, like literally what I do when I study this is I grab a piece of paper and okay, I'm like, on page 1 they do this, and on page 3 they do this, and on page 2 they do blah blah. So basically what I'll do is I'll like get a scrap piece of paper and I'll try to figure out what the basic structure is, so that I can figure out, okay, like how many panels are they using, how are they laying them out, why are they laying them out that way. It's just another way to study manga, especially if you have like a favorite mangaka that you want to start emulating or that you want to learn from. That's one good way to do it. So I hope that was kind of interesting to realize that of all the different layouts that exist, like 99% of them start from one of these 8 basic layouts. So the next thing I want to talk about is really important. The reason why it's really important is because I don't want to say it'll make or break you, but it can make or break you if you misuse it. The term we're talking about is called blockage. Essentially what blockage is it's the arrangement of your panels to make them readable. If we're thinking in a right to left brain, when we look at this setup right here, most people would go 1, 2, 3, and for this one, 1, 2, 3. This, however, can be extremely confusing if it's a manga, more manga inspired, that actually reads right to left. So I'm going to get another color really quick, and we'll write out how that would look. So if we have left to right, we'd have 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3. So you can see, depending on which structure you're using, it can be really important to make sure that you have a very clear setup, very clear layout, so that it's very obvious to the reader which direction they need to go. Because if you have a confused reader, the reader will walk away. It doesn't matter how cool your artwork is, it doesn't matter how cool your dialogue is, the rule of cool will only take you so far in keeping readers. So it doesn't matter how cool your character design is, doesn't matter how cool your art is. You could have freaking Yusuke Murata working on your stuff, and if the panel layout is really, really confusing, then they're gonna stop reading. Right? And that's not to say that, like, oh, if you have like really bad art but really, really, really good paneling, then people will keep reading it. It's non-mutual, it's not mutually exclusive, but you need to care. So what are ways that we can make this easy to understand as far as when we are choosing our blockage, when we are choosing our layouts? There was this really, really super cool, amazing study done by Neil Cohn. I'm hoping I say his name correctly. Actually, let me grab my red here really fast. Sorry guys. Alright, there was a really cool study done by Neil Cohn, and I have, there's a link to the study in the description if you guys would like to learn more. I went ahead and added this here so that you guys could go check it out for yourselves. The reason why this matters is the gutter thickness, or the spaces between the panels. If you didn't know what those called, it's called the gutter. The thickness between your panels can really, really affect your reading direction. If you aren't using blockage correctly, like, again, confused readers will leave. In this study, he changed how the gutter here between these panels were changed. You can see here it's lower, here it's higher, here it's higher. The thickness was also changed, as far as like how thick the gutters are, because especially for Western creators, the majority of our audiences are going to be non-Japanese. They're not going to be used to necessarily reading in a right to left direction, well, I guess, or any culture that reads right to left, because there's a lot of them. But some of your audience aren't going to be native manga readers. They may be comic readers wanting to explore manga. So that's why it's really, really important that your layout structure is incredibly clear using a staggered approach. If we look at this one right here, this is where a lot of the confusion was. We can see that 66 people will read this way if the gutters are lined up. If we have this gutter staggered down, people will tend to read this one first. And then once we get to this point, do we go down here? Do we go up here? We don't know. So it's really important when you're thinking about your layouts, you need to make sure that it is extremely clear. And you cannot rely on art. You cannot rely on text. If people have to go through and read all of your individual bubbles to figure out which panel is next, they're not going to keep reading because it's taking them so much additional effort to want to keep reading. So this is the part here that I actually want you to pay attention to, is how people decide like which ones were the most efficient to making it easier to read. So with that, we're actually going to look at what gutters are, how gutters work, and then something called rough pages and dense pages. These structures will also help with making your pages extremely readable. So let's go ahead and take the next step. Gutters. This is a page from Toriyama. Everyone knows Dragon Ball and the entire Dragon Ball franchise. Toriyama is infamous for his really wide gutters. So what are gutters? One of the things that's different in manga versus comics is the gutter here from the horizontal gutters, the gutters that run horizontally, are thicker than the gutters that run vertically. The gutters help tell the reader which panels are grouped together. We can clearly see that these are grouped together. And then we know after we read here, we gotta go here. And then if we have to choose which one of these panels we need to go to, we know to go up and then back down. So this layout is extremely clear. We have a typical S and then down, and then it would go boop off onto the next page. That's basically how this would work. And I can tell that this is a left-facing page because we can see all of it's a page that's on the left, it's a right-facing page. The difference may seem kind of subtle at first. It may be something that maybe you didn't notice. I actually have talked to some people that did not notice that the gutters in Western comics tend to be pretty similar, and then the gutters in manga very wildly. In the next panel, the next page, I'll actually show you guys like what those numbers typically are. But the space between this area here is a way to control time. It's a way to control a concept called pacing. And pacing and what's the word I'm looking for? We're just gonna go with pacing. My brain is dropping at the moment. So when pacing is something that you want to think about, just like in music, you don't want to have music be the same pace all the time. It's very rare that you listen to a piece of music where it's the exact same piece, like say Allegro, like the entire time. You know, there's Allegro, there's Largo, like faster and slower. There's all kinds of different pacing that you'll see, and you see this in animation, in TV, movies, you see it everywhere, right? The way that we control like how fast people move through things is via gutters, and it also tells you which panels are related, grouped together. Alright, speaking of gutters, one of the other things that we really need to think about is Wakusen, and then this page kind of also covers how they're related to gutters. Those lines, they're called Wakusen. This book here that I actually have displayed here, the Shonen Jump Guide to Making Manga, has been an incredible resource for me. If I can link it, it's on the Viz Media app. If I can link it to you in the description, I'll have a link there. I'll have a link to Amazon. I am not an Amazon affiliate, so it will not be an affiliate link. I'll also make sure I disclaim that in the description. I just think it's an absolutely amazing book that has been really helpful for me to learn about making manga, and I've used it as one of my sources in this particular presentation. The book says that there is no specific standard to how thick Wakusen needs to be. However, it does recommend 0.3 millimeters to a 1 millimeter thick line. It also states that the vertical gap should be between 2 to 4 millimeters, which we have right here, you know, this vertical gap here between panels. And then it says that the horizontal gap, which is, you know, this particular gap here, should be a 5 to 10 millimeters thick. These aren't like hardcore rules, however, they're rough estimates or ideas. It also does suggest that if you take a standard manga page, you know, so like if you were to scan in a manga page or get a digital copy of it, you could blow the manga up to 100.2, so 120% size. And it should be equal to a B4 sized page. If you can do a little bit of math, you could probably figure out what thicknesses your mangaka use, like your favorite mangaka uses, if you would like to emulate that. My recommendation is to do that only to study it. I wouldn't do it as oh hey, like I get to copy my favorite mangaka now. That's not really the path that I would take if you decide to do that. But it was something that this particular book did suggest. And again, if you want to check out the book, I will have links in my description so you can find a copy for yourself. I want to say it was $12 or $13 on the Viz Media app, and it's like 200 pages thick. It's an absolutely amazing book. It goes through like the process of like this young person who wants to be a mangaka and has almost virtually like zero drawing experience, and goes through the entire step of like going in, seeing an editor, like a shueisha, getting the feedback, and like growing and becoming a mangaka. So it's a wonderful book. Like 10 out of 10 would definitely recommend. Ooh, we got some thunder going on. Sorry guys. Oh, I got interrupted by nature. The next thing we're going to be talking about is rough pages versus dense pages. This is something that I learned studying the silent manga edition. They actually talk about this concept of rough pages versus dense pages. Rough pages have less panels. Dense pages, kind of self-explanatory, they have more panels. You don't necessarily want to have all of your panels the same size. If you're doing something like for Koma, then yeah, that might make sense to have all of your panels roughly the same size. But the size of the panels and the number of the panels, well, first off, the number of panels you have on any particular page will ultimately affect the size of those panels, because you can only fit so many panels into a specifically sized space. But additionally, the sizes of the panels themselves can affect the reader's speed. When you have a really large panel like these ones, I mean, technically all three of these are about roughly the same size-ish. A reader will typically spend more time going through them if they're filled. If they're completely full, if there's a lot of detail going in, that will slow the reader down. Sometimes if we have manga that feels like it's really slow, one of the possible causes of that could be just a lot of really big panels on pages that don't have a lot of panels, and it can take you a while to get through all of those things. Versus when we have something like smaller panels, like 1, 2, and 3, like these particular ones, these are smaller, quick motions. This is part of what I was talking about with pacing earlier. You want to have fast moments, you want to have slow moments. So basically, if we were to look at this from a pacing perspective, let me actually try my best. Da 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 da. You see what I mean? It's like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2. You could think about it that way if you're a music person. Actually, let me do it one more way. So if you're a music person, you could look at this as a half note. You could have these as quarter notes, and then maybe another half note, or maybe this could be like a whole note. I don't know. Or you could do it the same way here. You could have a half note, and then you could have maybe another half note, then like a full. Oh, boop, boop. I can't believe I forgot the tail. Oh, it's been too long since I played music. But that's one way that you can sort of look at these panels, is how long is this panel going, how long is a reader going to spend on this panel? You want to have a variety. You don't want it to just be the exact same rhythm over and over again. However, something else you have to consider is you can't have too many panels per page. That is most definitely a thing that can happen. So when we have something like this, oh my goodness, look at this mess. How the heck am I supposed to read that? We have dun 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 dun. That's too many. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That is too many. That's too many, my friends. Do not do this. Do not do this. Instead, simplify this layout. Less is more sometimes. We have 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Very simple layout compared to something like this. Let me erase all this and we'll just look at just the flow. Keep it nice and easy to look at. I should have had my layers ready. Dun, 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 dun. That's a lot of movement. That's an S curve, an S curve. Well, actually, oh, we have like do. That's a lot. That's like 3 S curves kind of mixed into one giant abomination. Versus if we have something like this, it's a very, very simple S curve. Sometimes less is more. Plus, when you have a bunch of these really, really tiny panels, these are going to be really, really quick motions and quick actions. There's not a lot of room for text. If you try to put text into these, you're not really going to be able to read them well. I mean, look at it just as it is on your screen. I have these pages almost as big as I can possibly get to fill in on the screen, and that's just too much. It's too much stuff. So versus if we have something like here, we can reasonably have bubbles, you know, that are big. Maybe right here, maybe we have sound effects and sound effects and sound effects, maybe big sound effect, and it's still going to be very legible. Versus in here, if we're trying to, you know, fit all this in, you're gonna have half your space just taken up by bubbles. And notice I had to draw these bubbles smaller just so that I could be sure that there's still like at least 2/3 of the space left for any action that's going on. Realistically, you don't want to have like 90% of your bubble space or even half of your panel space taken up by bubbles. That's not very helpful. So now that we've kind of gone over and learned some of these basic things, you know, we've gone over basic grids, we've gone over blockage, we've gone over gutters, Wakusen, and then like the rough versus dense pages. Oh, one more thing before I leave this particular topic that I want to go over with you guys. With rough versus dense pages, one of the things that I learned is in the oopsie, I meant to make a new layer. I'm sorry, guys. One of the things that I've learned when it comes to rough versus dense pages is in the beginning, so maybe like your first like 5 to 10 pages, you want to have those be rough. You want to start slower and you want to build up. You want to build up, and as you get towards the and this is for one chapter. So this is for one chapter. As you build up towards like your climax or like your most exciting point within that chapter, now you're gonna have more dense pages, and you can have anywhere from like 5 to maybe like 8 like dense pages, and then sprinkle in rough pages along the way, especially if you have like a big impact moment. For example, like, you know, My Hero Academia or One Punch Man, you've got Saitama like winding back and getting ready to do a punch. You don't want to have this punch be in like one of these like super tiny panels like, ooh, I'm pulling back and I'm gonna punch you, and it's getting all excited. Like, you don't want to have this in a tiny panel. So it's okay to have like a bunch of rough pages, like, you know, rough pages, rough pages, rough pages, rough pages, and then dense, dense, rough, dense, dense, rough, 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 you know, whatever. So you want to use a balance of these rough pages versus dense pages. And then at the end, as the action slows, or as you get towards like the super big like cliffhanger that'll make people want to read the next chapter, then you can go into the rough pages again. Kind of that way you have this rhythm of rough pages, dense pages, and you may have like a couple, you know, like, whoopsie, I grabbed the wrong color. You may have like a couple, you know, like sprinkled in between. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. I'm going to show you guys some examples of some of my pages that I've done, kind of continuing more about layout for like maybe unusual or different cases, how you can vary up layout to be a little bit more interesting. Here, I have no panel borders. No panel borders are definitely a thing that you can take advantage of. And if you do it well, it can be really fun and interesting. What I like to do is I like to use the elements of the artwork themselves to sort of create their own panels, per se, like their lines. Here we have Amat talking with Aros, and what I did is I purposely had a high contrast border here where we have, you know, these clouds and smoke separate Aros from Amat. And then same thing, I did the exact same thing here with Moriri. I had sort of these, you know, clouds and, you know, action lines and da-da-da, and then a close-up up here. So technically you'd see the close-up first. Oh, Aros, where are my souls? Blah, blah, blah. So let me get rid of that so you guys can actually see the flow that I used here, because we were just talking about flow, so let's do that. So here's my border. Here's my border. We have, ooh, you know, it basically just goes down and then up. You know, so we get to see everything. We have Aros talking here, and then Amat talking here. And then right here we have Monody. We have these really strong vertical lines that bring us down. This wing brings us down. Oh, text. Ooh, her face. Ooh, more text. So here I actually used more of a J curve. You know, so that's also a possible option. But you can, so there's more than just S and double S. There's also something called C in Western comics. Or you could have, you know, they call it like a reverse J. You know, it's like if you have like a panel here, and then maybe like a big one here. You know, you could technically have like a reverse J in Western comics if you're working with like a left to right format. So there's a wide variety of ways that you can make your pages that don't like have to rely on having panel borders. So push the limits. One of the other things that you can do is you can have your characters sitting on top of your panels, sort of almost like an inset. Not quite like an inset, but you get the idea. They can overlap a little bit. Or I think in Western comics they call that a panel break or breaking the panel. That way, you know, it's literally like it's breaking out of the space, if that makes any sense. So what I've done here, if we look at this one first, we have this arrow coming in. Oh, we see his face. We come down here. She's talking to him. Boop, boop. And then lead out. So here I actually have a double S curve. You'll see those a lot in my work. I like double S's. So again, we have this here, brings your attention. She's talking, she's getting ready to pull another arrow out. He's looking forward. The reason why I have this here, she's invading his personal space. She's invading his space. It makes it feel a little bit more like, ooh, like I'm invading your personal space. I'm trying to feel like I'm encroaching on you. It's a psychological thing that I attempted to do. Because if you notice, here's this big panel, and he's only got like a third of it. And here it's her talking, and she takes up another third of it. So she technically has 2/3 of this panel right here. So I did that on purpose because I wanted him to feel like encroached on. Same thing, that's literally the exact same thing that I did over here. We've got Monody confronting Aros, and so she's like encroaching on his personal space. She also is a lot bigger than he is. I mean, if you look at the size, like she's like 3 or 4 times as big as he is right here. And not only does she feel encroaching in only these 2 panels, she feels extremely encroaching here. She literally gets in his personal space. So if we look at how much panel space each one has, she's got more space and she's leaning into him, trying, you know, hopefully got that claustrophobic, backing him up against the wall of this panel. I want it to feel, ugh. And then she bites him. You know, there's a whole reason behind this. But, you know, so I thought that would be kind of fun. One other thing that I did, I'm not sure how I feel about this, but I wanted to try it. The bottoms of the panels actually go slightly down each time. I wanted it to feel, I wanted there to be some rhythm to it, because this did feel kind of claustrophobic a little bit. So what I did is I purposely added some steps here, just to maybe help a little bit with the pacing, maybe make it look a little bit different. I don't know how I like it. I might see if I want to keep doing it in the future. I don't know. So hopefully that's kind of interesting to see how I handle some of these things. I have one more set of examples for you guys, if you would like to see them, of different ways that you can have like you can actually mix these concepts together, not just overlapping, but also artwork within your gutters that are panel-less. One example is this particular set right here. I have Aros sitting. This is the first time you get to actually like see Aros in the present moment from my manga. And what I did is I had this bottom panel border meet him here. So that way basically he serves as the panel border. He serves as that panel border. So we start here, and then this panel border starts up here after he talks. So that we make sure they read this way. They see him, they see this, and then they see Coco. One thing that I would change is I would not put this here. I would completely get rid of it so that it doesn't exist, and I would put it somewhere else, or I would find another moment to introduce Aros. That's actually one of the reasons why I'm redoing my pages, is I want to have a better setup, a better introduction to my characters. So that's kind of one thing that I would change. Another fun example is this one. I have a little like overlay panel break here where we're looking at Coco. But one of the things that I did, I don't know how many people noticed this, Coco is pointing to Coco. That's a little Coco right there. if you guys hadn't noticed, there's a little tiny Coco right here. And because this is so small, I have this really nice big establishing panel kind of showing us where we are. I have a little like inset that points to this to show what this is, which is this little vial that we see over here. So that's why I did that. But the point I wanted to talk about actually was this. Notice in this area here, there are no panel borders. There's nothing. It's a memory. It's Coco thinking about Fale. So I purposely didn't want to box that up. I wanted it to feel airy. I wanted it to feel like you'd almost hear like a wow kind of feeling to it, because it's nostalgia. You're remembering something. It's not memory. It's memory. It's very light. It's very airy. So I purposely didn't want to put that within a panel, and then I followed that up with this really literally coming down from her into, you know, this pouring in is what this is, and then sort of coming. So the flow for this particular type of page is boop, boop. It's that S-curve again. I love me some S-curves. I love S-curves. I use them all the time. I don't know why I moved that. Sorry guys, I'll put that back. I don't know why I moved that. And then I did the exact same thing here in this bottom set that I did before. This is also sort of like a memory. It's a thought. It's Aro's thinking about this character's eye. So I have her not within any panel borders. She actually takes up the bottom bleed of the page. And then we actually have Aro's having a thought here, going into another thought, which leads us in here. Actually, technically the way I set this up is this thought here, and then this directs us off the page. This directs us off the page. And it kind of also intentionally like stops it, because I have, almost looks like I have two panels here. That was on purpose. I wanted there to be a stop, read, and then go, because I didn't want people to miss this bubble. So, and I didn't want people to miss this particular figure either. So hopefully that was helpful to you guys. I know that was like a lot of content. According to what I see here, this was like a 30-something minute video. I hope this was helpful to you guys. I'm really sorry. I will put chapters in here. The next video that we'll be going over, as I mentioned before, will be Koma and panel types in manga. I've grouped them into 3 different chunks just because there's a lot of different panel types. These are more based on, actually, this one should be over here. These 2 are based on shape, like the shape of the panel, and then these 3, or these 4, can't math, these 4 right here are based on the purpose, so more like, can't spell today, I almost spelled porpoise. The porpoise is not what we need purpose. To sort of like why we use these, how we're using it, like sort of psychologically with our reader. I mean, these like naname goma, masku goma, they do have like a psychological purpose, but they're more like, oh, like I'm a straight corner panel, or I'm like an oblique panel. And then our next video will be, how does it all relate? You know, how do all of these factors relate to Kishotenketsu? And I promise you they do. Like the layout Komawari that you use in your manga is really, really important, because you want to create a Kishotenketsu flow not only in your entire story, but in each volume, in each chapter, and ideally within each page or 2-page spread. So understanding how your layouts work with the 4-part act of Kishotenketsu will make you a really, really strong storyteller. It's really, really important to know those things. Alright guys, that's the end of the video. If you've watched all the way to the end, thank you so much. I really appreciate your support. If you'd like to keep supporting me, you can hit like, which tells the algorithm that you liked this video, and we'll refer it to more people so that they can benefit from it. You can also hit subscribe and hit the bell so that you don't miss out on any more videos or any of my live streams, because guess what? I also stream manga! So I usually will stream the manga making process or anything else that I'm working on. Those are Monday to Fridays at 7 p.m. Central and Sunday to Thursday at 10 p.m. Central. I will see you guys next time. If you would like to support me outside of YouTube, you can read my manga Godsbane on Global Comics or Manga Plus. Links in the description below, links to all my resources below, and I will see you guys next time. I'm ArtCrumbs, and have a wonderful day. Ciao!